Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I am AA Ron, and this is the Inclusive Dad Podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe, rate, or review the show on your favorite platform. We truly appreciate your feedback and would be honored if you shared the podcast with friends and family who might benefit. If you want to support us in our mission, please click on the link in the show description. Today, my guest is John Fela. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Aaron. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Why don't you start us out just telling my listeners a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I always start off these conversations, I say that I identify as a parent of disability. I have a 16-year-old son, Christopher, or Chris, who has autism and is also nonverbal. Currently, he's actually living at a residential facility out in Wichita, Kansas. That's not a permanent stay there, but he did transition to finish up his high school years, and then he'll eventually be coming home here to the Chicago area. I am kind of all disabilities all the time in my world. So in my day job, I work for Joni and Friends, which is a global Christian disability organization. We support families and churches around the world who identify with disability. We do a variety of different outreaches, specifically in the States for families. My role actually with the organization is to train churches of any denomination on how to develop programs for disability, become more accessible, bring awareness to their staff and that type of thing. In my not day job, I'm an advocate. So I'm actually a national advocate for disability. I've actually done that for several years prior to my current day job. A lot of stuff on the side. So I work with a variety of organizations as a speaker, conference speaker. I've done a ton of podcast interviews just like this, done a lot of writing, blog writing as well, and just a whole variety of other things. So again, I've dabbled a little bit into everything in the disability world. So again, I wear those many hats as a parent, advocate, and also as a former educator for almost 20 years, where I worked with a variety of students of all levels, and including doing some special ed as well.
Okay. What haven't you done?
I haven't finished my book yet, which
Okay.
that's a long time coming, but I'm working on it. So it's
There you
it's the check is in the mail, as they say. But yeah,
go. There you
I
go.
started it a few years ago. It'll get done.
Yeah,
It's actually a memoir of my experience being a special needs parent, and tying
sure.
back to some in terms of some of the ways that I was raised and that kind of thing. So.
Sure. That's great. Thank you. What is your definition of inclusion?
Well, it's a great question, and I will tell you that I can give a definition of it, but I actually want to expand on it a little bit because, whenever that issue or question of inclusion comes up, whether it's in my work, let's say with churches, or even when I was an educator, or even raising my own son, I think we have to make a distinction that there is a difference between inclusion and what I would call acceptance or belonging, or sometimes we use the term co-laboring, let's say, meaning that uh, inclusion is a great goal, especially, for example, in my day job, where I'm working with a church where maybe they don't have a structured program or supports for individuals with disabilities, and you want to make sure that you have that space available, right? You want to make sure that staff has an awareness, and people are welcoming and all that. But where inclusion becomes an issue, and I've seen this on the school side as well too, is many times it can lead to a almost separate but equal kind of a conversation, meaning we're going to have a space for those folks, but where is that space? And when I talk to churches all the time, there's this effect called siloing, meaning everybody is kind of in their own little
Right. Yep.
locked box, and no one's getting out. So we have a spot for you. It's that room that's down the hall, down the stairs, close the door, see you later, no one knows you're there, right? Inclusion is great as kind of to begin some of these conversations, or again, even in the school setting, where you want to make sure that students are being supported the way they need to. But where we really want to get to is acceptance, meaning, okay,
Right.
not only are you allowed to be there, not only do we want you to be there, but we're going to treat you like anyone else. Now, that doesn't mean that maybe someone still doesn't need some specific supports or help or that type of thing. But at the same time, we want to understand that people with disabilities have interests. They have desires to help, to be involved, to contribute. In churches that I work with, for example, that do this very well, not only do they have a thriving disability ministry or program, but those individuals with disabilities are also part of the everyday life of the church.
Right.
They are present in all the different environments. They help out with a lot of the different events or fundraisers or programs, and they contribute. Right? They actually volunteer themselves, which is something that a lot of folks have a hard time wrapping their heads around. But the reality is that when we truly have a honor and respect for a person with a disability, regardless of their condition, then we can see them as a full human being, and then we can understand that they have value too and something also to contribute. So that's really the end goal argument. I know part of that question was, I don't think you asked it yet, but what's an example of a way to bring inclusion into an environment, let's say. One great example, and I'll use this, from raising my own son. His mom and I, who I'm divorced from, but when we were raising him, we would do this in his elementary school setting because he was always in a special ed room. But then we would either talk to the mainstream students in the mainstream classroom where he would spend some of his time, or even at the church Sunday school where he would be around a lot of typical kids. And we would essentially do an awareness talk, meaning we would come into the classroom, we would talk to the students, we would say, hey, listen, this is who Chris is. Let's talk about some of the things that Chris likes doing. Hey, he likes a lot of the same stuff you do. We even had a little video made at one point, him doing all the different things he was involved in. Chris likes a lot of the same stuff, but you know what? Chris is going to sometimes act a little differently. He's not going to communicate the same as you, specifically because he's not verbal. But you know what? These are ways you can connect with him. These are ways you can communicate with him. These are ways he's just like you, right? And then that allows a space to say, instead of kids who, can be kids and say, well, who's that and why is he doing that and why is he different? As opposed to, oh, okay, well, that's just Chris. Yeah, we know all about him. Right. And so that I think is where the conversation, we can start with inclusion, but I think we also have to remember where we're trying to get to as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point because we talk about inclusion. So my part of my story is I have two children. My youngest is my daughter Cecilia. She just turned 22 a couple weeks ago, but she has been diagnosed with cerebral palsy and epilepsy. So, like you guys had the conversations with the class about awareness, we had people from the Epilepsy Foundation come in and talk about epilepsy, seizures. This might happen. This is what it's going to look like. So that part of it. So that's definitely a great strategy. The other piece about the inclusion is, she was excluded, sent to a special ed room across town early on because we didn't know any better, know that she could be included. And then once we were working on getting her back in with her gen ed peers, there were several times she got into the room, but then she was kind of over on the corner, still kind of by herself. So that's not. She needs to be part of the room, being accepted, being able to participate in everything. So that's a great points that you brought up.
Thank you. Yeah.
What? So obviously, I'm a dad who has a daughter with a disability. You have a son, with autism. Like, my experience when I go to meetings, any type of workshops, if I'm not the only guy in the room, I'm surprised. Have you seen similar things when you've been advocating?
Without question, and I will tell you that I've done a lot of work with dads and dad organizations, special need dad organizations, and I'll tell you it's a pervasive thing across the board. And I can get into my story a little bit here, but when I started out doing my thing, again, I want to really emphasize, I was just another lost parent, right? I didn't have resources, I didn't have support, and a lot of the things are geared toward the moms, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. We love especially our autism mama bears and all that, but what was the stuff for me? And the other thing I just want to emphasize here quickly too is that as men, we process these experiences differently. There are different kinds of support we need. There are different things that are going to make us comfortable, kind of thing. So I know that, even dads that are very involved, a lot of times, making connections, especially with guys they don't know, is very challenging. I have done, for example, a couple of different iterations of a special needs dad support group that just met locally in my community. I remember 10 years ago, I started one version of it. I got a bunch of dads out the first time, and then after that, it was nothing, right? And then I started another version about 5-6 years ago, which actually it's still in existence. Obviously we took some ups and downs with COVID and all that, but
Yep.
we still get guys that come out, and sometimes it's the same guys, and sometimes it's more guys, sometimes it's less. But the thing I found is that a lot of times it comes down to guys identifying that they need someone to talk to that gets it, right. That was one thing that I also learned the hard way in the beginning. It's not that I didn't have friends or family to talk to, but they didn't get my experience. They didn't get what
Right.
I was going through.
Right.
So what I always encourage dads to do is find at least one guy. Okay, maybe you don't want to sit in a room of 10 dudes you've never met and bare
Yeah.
your feelings. Well, find one. There are great organizations, that I've been a part of. One that I always plug everywhere I go, Special Fathers Network. If you're not familiar, they're based in Chicago. They're a national organization. Special Fathers Network has a variety of supports for dads, a lot of virtual things. There are virtual meetup groups that meet several times a week, and some that are specific to a geographical area around the country, and it's growing. There's a mentoring program. You can get connected with one dad if you just want to talk to one guy, and there's a kind of an algorithm for that, as far as whether you're looking for someone in your area geographically,
Sure.
or based on your child's condition, et cetera. And otherwise, there's just a bunch of great online resources, YouTube channel, podcasts, et cetera. So I'm always encouraging guys, look, don't do this alone, because you can't, right? Again, if you don't want to start with 10, start with one, but get someone who understands your experience, because again, as you go through this journey, I have had the experience of being married and gone through a divorce, gone through the ups and downs of counseling, almost separation, and then finally divorce, being a single dad, getting remarried. Life as a parent with disability is hard, and some of these things would be hard even without disability in there, but when you throw disability in, it makes it that much more challenging. And so you must always have that support on some level.
Yeah. Yeah, that all makes sense. And I mean, that's a great point. You mean if you don't want to be around a bunch of guys, just find that one. I mean, for me, it's just, I mean, I don't. When you first meet a guy, you don't go up and say, "Hey, I have a daughter with a disability." That's not usually what people lead off with. So, I mean, also just other times, just being around guys, just doing other stuff that takes your mind off. It's also been good for me. Just I play Magic the Gathering, or some people golf or do other things. Just having those other times for yourself too is also important.
And that is one thing I'll also chime in on really quick is, one big piece of advice that I always give to guys who are married is, make sure that you have the structure of a calendar for your week, month, etc. Because one of the things that we learned the hard way was, you don't want to get into this pattern of, I'm the one who always takes our kid to therapy. I'm the one that always does the doctor's appointments, whether that's mom or dad. I'm the
Right.
one who always does this. So you want to make sure you have balance, and not only that you're organized as far as the places you need to be, but also self-care. When are you taking time for yourself? You have to, right? So
Yes.
we had to learn how to chisel out, okay, this is your day and your night to go do whatever you're going to do,
Yep.
go out with your friends, or, go work out or whatever
Yeah.
it is. And then, we'll do that for the other partner. And then, make sure you have a date night also kind of chiseled in there too. So you're spending time together as a married couple, so you don't forget what that's about. But
Yeah.
again, you have to give yourself that structure, and you almost have to make it a routine and make it a regular kind of part of your muscle memory. Because if you're not getting the self-care, and again, whatever your thing is, but if you're
Yep.
not doing that, then you don't have anything to give later. And that's when things like the guilt, the resentment, and all those other bad feelings can build up in the marriage and the relationship and cause bigger problems.
Yeah, for sure. I'm also divorced. So yeah, I mean, I understand everything you're talking about. There's just a lot of, and as a parent, I mean, my son, he was on the gifted spectrum more in school, so we had that, and then 15 months later it was my daughter, so it was all new stuff, and I mean, all that combined with, yeah, I was working, she was home with the kids, and then I'd work all day or work lots of hours, come home, and then try to take care of my daughter, so she would have a break, and then just not take care of myself, and that over a long period of time is not good for anybody. So definitely have to take time for yourself. That's great. How did you get started in your advocacy work?
Yeah, that's an interesting journey. As I kind of touched on in the beginning, when I started out, I was just another lost parent.
Yeah,
I just needed any kind of support that I could get, and we went through a season of life where literally nothing was working. So I think the first thing I realized was I didn't have any community. I didn't have any support. I didn't have anybody that got me. So I tried to do some of those things intentionally, as I mentioned, even in the early days, starting out, just trying to connect with other dads.
sure.
But in terms of more of my formal stuff, I would tell you it was about 2017, and I had gone through a period of life where we had really good support for several years. We were doing the marriage counseling. We had a really strong neighborhood and community where our son went to school. We had a lot of good relationships with those
Sure.
families, especially of disability. We had a very strong church that we were involved in, and things like that. So we had a lot of support. And then I started to feel, okay, I need to either give back, or I'm starting to feel some kind of like a creative urge or something.
Right.
So my current organization that I work for, which is Joni and Friends, one of the things that they do every summer is they do family retreats. So we do retreats for
Okay.
families of disability, regardless of the age, condition of the person, doesn't matter. We do them all over the country. The ones in our
Okay.
Chicago office, we actually host up in Michigan. And there were a bunch of families that I was connected through there. And one of the moms was a writer for a very small disability ministry that was in Wisconsin. And I was just looking, I'm like, you know what? I've always wanted to write, and I'm just looking for an outlet. And she said, well,
Hmm.
why don't you try us? We're always looking for a dad's perspective, a guy's perspective. Why don't you try it? And I never really saw myself as a blogger or whatever, but yeah, I'll give
Yep.
it a try. And I tried it and I liked it, and I kept doing it. And then after about 6 months, that organization merged with a bigger organization out of the Cleveland area called Key Ministry. And Key Ministry is one of the largest disability ministries in the country. They have a lot of great online resources, and they really pour a lot into families, churches, et cetera, in terms of
Yep.
getting those supports. So I became a writer for them, and then I started speaking at their yearly national conference in Cleveland. I got connected with other organizations, started being a speaker for them, sharing my story again, really as a special needs dad, but
Yep.
then also speaking to things like the nature and importance of community, talking about other ways to resource yourself as a parent, et cetera. So I started doing a lot of those interviews, podcasts, videos, and it all just kind of snowballed.
Yeah.
So at this point now, I've done a lot of different things. Again, there are some things that I'm still trying to finish, like that book.
Yep.
But at the same time, what it's allowed me to do is to make a lot of great connections and resources in the disability community, where now I'm at a place, and especially for my day job that I've been doing a couple of years now, where if someone is looking for something and maybe it's not something we do or offer,
Yeah.
I know someone I can pass you off to. You know what?
For sure.
I think this is the person you should talk to. Or likewise, for my own family, for my own son, now I have enough of a background to where I know, okay, you know what? Maybe this school environment or this residential environment is maybe not the best choice. Again, my son
Yep.
currently lives out in Wichita, Kansas. The reason for that is because there just weren't a lot of good choices where we live. That's not to say that
Right.
there aren't some, but the ones that were in front of us weren't that great. And part of the reason that I knew that was because of the relationships I had made over the years.
Sure.
And I could lean into them and say, you know what, based on what I've heard, not a good choice. Let's look at something
Yep.
else. So
Yeah.
that is really the benefit there. And again, even just really quick, just to touch on, dads finding resources at all. What you have to remember is that, you getting connected with someone or with a community of guys, it's going to give back to them, and it's going to give back to you, right? It's
Right.
that's what true relationship is. And so that's what I've really experienced, and I've appreciated from being around all these folks that are doing so much work. And again, a lot of the work that's being done in this country from an advocacy side is really being led by parents. It's parents of
Yeah.
disability that have are walking this journey, and they're like, look, we don't like what's out there because
Yeah.
it's not good enough, or it's just not enough, period. How can we fix it? And so that's really been the encouraging thing, for me to see too.
Yeah. That is a great point. I mean, if you look back at through history, like a lot of the big things that happened, it's people with disabilities along with parents of people with disabilities who have been the ones out there yelling and screaming and getting stuff changed. So, yeah, parents are definitely very important. This morning I just read your blog post about dropping your son off at his residential. place in Kansas. So my daughter, like I said, she's 22. I'm 47. She lives with her mother. So I mean, in my mind, we're getting close to. We need to be having conversations about where's she gonna live if one of us is not able to take care of her anymore. So can you go into a little more in depth if you're okay with it about like as a dad how you maybe processed having to have your son go to school in Kansas away from you like that, or having other people taking care of him or doing things that you were used to doing.
Yeah, that was a big leap for sure. And
Yeah.
the one thing I'll say to start out with was it was something we never expected.
Mm-hmm.
He was having a great experience. He had been in the same school district since kindergarten. And again, regardless, maybe there were a couple ups and downs along the way, like with
Yeah.
anything, but we were always happy. And he started high school freshman year, seemed to go fine. Sophomore year, this last school year, just everything changed. Now again, so we can't explain it all, whether it's hormonal, whether it's because of
Yep.
some other physical issues he has, but he started to show aggression. He started to lash out at parents or teachers, staff, and his
Yep.
parents. And so what do we do with this? We can't just, we were at a point, and I speak about this in the blog too, the school was calling us every day, hey, can you come pick up
Yep.
your son? Well,
Yep.
I might be working from home, but I'm still working. I just can't drop everything, that type of
Yes.
thing.
Yep.
So with the school district, we looked at some options, and initially the options were what's close to home that might be a therapeutic day school, just another, a school environment option
Yep.
kind of thing. Most of the places that we experienced either didn't have an opening, or based on his profile, they just didn't want to take it. When we looked at some stuff that was out of state, and we did know some families that have done that type of thing, and so we knew a few of the schools in terms of name. We
Right.
looked at that, but the one that he's currently at, which is called Heart Spring in Kansas, they pretty much said yes to everything. And it was yes, no problem, we can handle it. And then we started to hear from other parents, and even some of my son's therapists, who said, yes, I've heard of that place. It's supposed to be really great. It's supposed to be one of the best in the country. All of this. We said okay. So it was a decision that we had to make based on what his needs were in the moment.
Right.
We never said, okay, look, we're going to drop him off here and then
Yep.
wash our hands of it, and that's it. It's okay. This is for a time, because he couldn't live there permanently anyway. It only goes up to 21. So
Yep.
he's either going to finish high school, or maybe he does a little bit of his transition years, and then he'll come home, and we'll figure it out from there. Um, so I would tell you, from the experience of enrolling our child and going through that whole process of getting him there, that actually was, I wouldn't say it was easy, but it was, they definitely made it as streamlined as they could. It
Sure.
really wasn't that much of a chore to do what we needed to do in
Yeah.
order to get him, to get his admissions there. But more of that challenge too, speaking to it, is the emotional,
Yeah.
quality of it, and being a parent. And I will tell you that, I've lived with, yes, divorced from his mom, but we have joint custody. I see my son several days a week.
Yeah.
I always have my son around, and when I'm with him, because of the nature of his autism, I have to consistently support him. He
Yes.
can't really do anything independently. So one of the big fears, of course, is this is a child who can't speak, can't really advocate for himself, and he needs help with everything. I don't want to leave him anywhere,
Right.
because I in my head, I'm feeling nobody can take care of him, right?
Right.
And one of the things that I think helped was, he did have an experience the last couple of years where there was an away camp for special needs, where it was
Okay.
just, the individual going. So like, unlike my organization where the whole family goes, it was just him. And we sent him away for like a few weeks at a time, and he did great. So I think
Yeah.
that was
That
encouraging to
helps.
see
Yeah.
that we could make it. But
Yeah.
I tell the story, and I think I said it in the blog too, but one of the hardest things for me the day we dropped him off, we were there the whole day. We went through all of the meetings with the school staff and the residential staff and, administration and everything. We got to observe a little bit, spend time with them. They say leave at dinner time. It's kind of a natural trend. He's eating, and you guys, okay, see you later. We'll talk to you soon. I couldn't get it out of my head that, they had in their little in his group home in their little community area, they sat him down, they got his dinner, and okay, this looks like something he'll eat, great. But some of it I knew he was going to need help with because he doesn't do a
Yeah.
fork very well. He's fine with hands, but some things you need a fork. And I just kept thinking to myself, who's going to feed him? Because like this would be me. I would be sitting right here. I'd be helping him out. You got this. Okay, good. And it was almost this kind of mental switch, or I got a little kick in the butt that said, dude, you got to go. You got to leave. Like, he's fine. You got to go.
Yeah.
And that was probably the hardest part of that, was trusting your child with people you really don't know. Right. I mean, and anything can look good on the outside, and I often say this to people, especially about, making choices for schools and things like that. Anybody can make a pretty website. Anybody can make it sound good. What is it really like on the inside? And how will you know until he's there?
Yeah.
Right. And so you hope and pray that we don't learn the hard way. Maybe this wasn't a good decision. So far, it's been wonderful. So far, awesome. It has been great. Now we have nothing but positive things to say. But that kind of separation from your child, and again, in some ways, people would say, well, it's just like him going away to college. I'm like, well, yeah, and he's doing it a little younger too. But it's one thing if you have a typical child that is independent to whatever degree. My child is not. So it's that fear of, I'm leaving a child who is powerless in an environment where he is totally dependent on those people. And boy, I hope those people are good. So,
yeah. I mean, that's what struck me about the story. So my daughter, she requires like assistance with all daily living tasks. So, I mean, it's the same thing. She comes here and, I mean, I know how to set up her plate, or she wants to do this independently. Well, you have to scoop this much so she can, chew it up easily and put it on the spoon this way so she can grab it and all those things. So yeah, I read that part of the blog post and I was like, yeah, that would be me doing the same thing. Like, nope, you're not feeding her correctly or something. You just got to leave. So that really, that I knew what you were talking about.
That's great.
Why is community such an important part of support for parents with disability?
Because as I've learned the hard way, you can't do this life alone. When people ask me for advice, okay, so what's your best advice for a family or a parent, dad, whatever? For me, and I always call it my 1A, 1B conversation, right? So 1A for me is my faith. My Christian faith is my foundation as far as where I get support from. I realize not everybody is Christian or religious or whatever. That's cool. That's your thing. For me, that is. But 1B is community. You can't do this alone. You need people, right? And what I learned was it was, again, even in those early days of just trying to find anything, someone that at least understood, again, maybe not exactly, but still got it for the most part, that you could just talk to. But then also, as you go through this process, I think the thing that you also learn is how much you really are dependent on people in your community, in your group that, also have disability going on, where you're going to get advice or suggestions or, hey, have you tried this? So many things have come to us because someone else told us about it. Right. And I say that to folks all the time is, there's a lot of great resources out there. Most people just don't know, how to find them or where they are, and I have that experience all the time. I'm like, hey, have you heard of this? I've never heard of that. And in my head, I'm thinking, well, this is a big organization, or this is a big thing online or something. It doesn't mean everybody knows about it. So, you want to make sure that you're plugged in, that you've developed those relationships with people you can share with, talk to. They can maybe give you some advice or suggestions, but without community, you have nothing. I know for myself, it meant that much to me, not just as a parent who was looking for resources. It was, who can I really lean into on the really hard days? 10 years ago when, my son's mom and I almost got divorced, and even though we didn't, but, it was community that kind of helped me get through that. Or when I literally did get divorced, right? And one quick story I'll tell you to this point. In my presentations, I often talk about something called a tale of two parking lots. So a tale of two parking lots go like this. Over 10 years ago, when my son's mom and I were almost getting divorced, I remember I was sitting outside the church we attended at the time, there was a men's group that met every Friday night. I was sitting in the car because it was early, and I decided to call a couple of my oldest friends. We were going through all this stuff. I didn't know if the marriage was going to survive. Like everything that could go wrong was going wrong. And both of them basically said, man, we love you, but we don't know how to help you. I mean, and one of my friends actually said, if I were you, I would just walk away. And I'm like, well, I can't do that. I need something else. And then I go into this church meeting, and then I find out that, I share with all these guys, and most of the guys, I was in my 30s at the time. Most of these guys are at least 20, 30 years older than me. So I'm thinking I'm going to get some sage wisdom or advice here. After I shared everything that was happening, the whole room was silent, and the group leader basically said, wow, that's really hard. We're sorry to hear that. But what you need to hear is that it's going to be okay. Now, here's the thing. In the long run, in the big picture, yeah, it is going to be okay. But when you're in crisis, that's the last thing you want to hear. You want someone who's going to be empathetic and say, hey, you know what, man, let's tell us more. How can we help? Let's see what we can do here, right? So I realized then I didn't have the community. Now, as I built that community over the years, the second part of that story is 7 years later, I found myself in another parking lot sitting in my car. It was the day after Thanksgiving, Black Friday. Can't make this up. My wife had just handed me divorce papers out of the blue. Did not expect it. It was just, I don't love you anymore. Here you go. So I needed to get out of the house. I needed to clear my head. This totally threw me for a loop. Drove a couple miles, sat in my car outside some, big box store, and I started making phone calls again. This time, though, I had a ton of special needs parents, specifically dads I could lean into. I had a special need attorney friends who could at least help me with the legal process. I had friends who, were in ministry who could kind of, support me or counsel me or something. I had people I could lean into that. So that when it really went down and I really needed those folks, they were there. But if I was that guy 7 years before, I don't know how it would have wound up because I didn't have it. And, I was glad to have it when I really needed it. But I also had to put the work in to intentionally build that around me.
Yeah. That's a great explanation about community and how important it can be. What is one tip you can share today to help our listeners be more inclusive? Just something simple they can do starting today.
Have an awareness of the people in your environment. More often than not, we tend to be a society that just we just keep going our own way. We just keep doing our own thing. As long as we don't think somebody's in a major critical situation or dying or all right, well, whatever, it's not my problem. Right. Take a moment. If there is someone, whether they have an identifiable disability, maybe they're just having a bad day, whatever, have more of an awareness of the people around you and maybe what they need, Check in with someone. How are you doing? When we talk about disability, we have to remember that it's not just someone who's a wheelchair user or someone who has profound autism, like my son. Mm-hmm. It's okay. There are mental health issues, which are rampant now. There's anxiety, depression, all of these things. Check in with somebody. How are you doing? Is there something I can do for you? Right. And you don't have to rearrange your day and you don't have to turn the world upside down. But if there's one thing that being a parent of disability has taught me, it's how to be a kinder person. It's how to be a kinder, more empathetic person with people around me. And you know what? Maybe I don't even know you that well, but you know what? I just want you to know if you need something, I'm here. That type of thing.
Yeah, for sure. You talked about a couple of resources, the Special Fathers Network and Key Ministry. Or is there any other resources you want to share with the listeners, maybe specifically for fathers, but others in general?
Yeah, so I would tell you those are two good ones. And the reason why I say that is because I consider those organizations to be kind of hubs for where a lot of people around the country who are doing great things in disability work. So, for example, if you go to Special Fathers Network and you look at that podcast list, pretty much anyone who's anybody in disability has been interviewed on there. regardless of the work they're doing. So you're going to see a lot of familiar faces
Sure.
and
Okay.
names. So that's a great way to plug in. Same thing with Key Ministry. If you just go to their speakers or writers page, you're going to see a lot of people from around the country who are very, very involved with doing a lot of things on different levels. So I would say those are two great places to start. There's a couple of other organizations that I'll just plug for dads too. One is called Rising Above Ministries. It's out of Kentucky, and
Okay.
they also, like Special Fathers Network, they also have virtual dad meetups that meet up during the week, so you can get plugged into them as well. Steve
Okay.
Chapman is actually the COO of that organization, and they do that for dads. They do it for moms as well, but it's good they do it for the dads. And there's also another great organization called Fatherhood Co-Mission. Okay, so co and mission together. And again,
Sure.
similar thing, national organization for dads. They do a lot of different outreaches. I think they also do like Rising. So all of these organizations, Special Fathers Network, Rising Above, Fathers Commission, they have some form of a virtual meetup, but they also do at least once a year a big in-person like dads like getaway or retreat
Okay.
event type of a thing. And it's in different parts of the country. So depending on maybe what's closest to you, it might be something you want to get plugged into. So those are some
Sure.
I definitely share for dads, but again, like I said, with Key Ministry 2 and Special Fathers, two great hubs of information. Even if you're a mom, and you can, we Special Fathers Network has interviewed women too, right? So
Yeah.
you can still get plugged in some great resources, some great organizations you can maybe find out more about depending
Awesome.
on maybe what you're looking for.
Perfect. You ready for the last question?
Absolutely.
Do you like spam? Yes or no?
I'm going to default and say yes. I
You're
do.
gonna default
I
and say
don't
yes.
eat it often, but I do like it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I asked that question is I live in Austin, Minnesota, where they make spam and where the spam museum is located. So if you ever come to Minnesota and want to visit the spam museum, you'd have to come to Austin.
Now, if you go to the museum though, can you get some spam like to consume, or is it just come and
So
see some
yeah,
stuff?
there's a spam museum and they have a gift shop. You can buy spam in there, and also there's usually a volunteer walking around with a tray with little chunks of spam with a pretzel stick in it, and they're passing out spamples, so you can get a free
All
spample
right,
while you're walking around. So
all right, that's going on the list for real, for real.
yeah. Where's the place? Where's the best place for everyone to connect with you?
Absolutely. So, first of all, I'll say I do have a website. It's just johnfella.com, johnfella.com. That's where most of my content is.
Okay.
I will let you know that because I tend to produce a lot of this stuff on a regular basis, my friend who is my webmaster can't always keep up. So if you
Yeah.
want to find maybe more recent stuff, like the blog article you mentioned that just came out, go to my social. So I'm on Facebook, John Special Needs Blog. John Special Needs Blog on Facebook, or you can just type my name in and you can find me. I've got a regular account. Or Fela _1. So John _Fela _1 on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, X, all of those. Just
Yep.
type my name and you'll find me, kind of thing. So punch me into the Google machine. You'll see some stuff for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Absolutely, it was great.
To all of you listening, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Inclusive Dad Podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, or review the show. Your feedback helps us connect with more champions of inclusion. Remember to share this podcast with friends and family who might benefit. If you want to support us in our mission, please click on the link in the show description. Together we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.